Greetings, ladies and gents, and welcome to this latest narration of the web series Wearing Power Armor to a Magic School. If you're new to the series, there is a playlist listed down below in the description, and as always, I hope that you enjoy. Chapter 59, The Mercenary Prince. The cultural exchange database was vast, expansive, and most important of all, it was dynamic. It was designed to be that way, such that the information conveyed within could be tailored and trimmed to fit the socio-cultural particularities of whatever entity, polity, or civilization existed on the other side of the portal. I, along with the EVI's very specifically coded subroutines for this very eventuality, could effectively pick and choose from the compendium of all human knowledge, the cumulative sum total of all that had ever existed, barring, of course, a good chunk of specifics and details that would otherwise have taken up too much drive space. Still, the condensed cumulative sum of all human experience was nothing to scoff at. What's more, it was way more than what I needed for the purposes of this little demo. I needed to be selective, gradual, and conservative in my approach in information dissemination after all, because if Dacia's experience was anything to go by, fundamental systemic incongruity was something that I'd need to consistently consider, lest I show Earth Ring in the first 5 seconds of my demo, and the whole thing just ends up flying over everyone's head, killing not just the whole vibe and mood of the reveal, but actively sabotaging one of the core tenets of my mission altogether, ruining any meaningful capacity to understand by outright overloading them with knowledge they would have zero reference points for. I needed to start simple. Or more specifically, I'd have to start off with something they could relate to. Something that was topical and in the moment, a jumping-off point that the group could easily comprehend, a subject matter that was close to home for them, before eventually slowly zooming out, expanding outwards, and building brick by brick the progress humanity had made on matters they were familiar with. It was metal foundries and forges in Dacia's case, given how the conversation topic at the time tended towards my armor and the material sciences behind it. And even then, I halted it at around the 21st to 22nd century earthbound forges. "All right, it's decided I should be going first," Thalman began, with a wide-eyed look of excitement, slamming his open paw down on the table in a display of emotive telegraphy. "Well, let's hear it," I matched Thalman's excitement with a beat for beat. "Not just yet, Emma," Thalman responded cryptically, standing up to full height, "for I doubt mere words will be sufficient to convey the beauty and majesty that is Havenbrook. It would be far too common of me to simply resolve to oral descriptions to illustrate my home, my people, and my heritage, not especially to an audience of peers." He spoke with a certain swagger that matched his pace. A beam of excitement continued through each and every one of his steps as he marched his way towards his room. This prompted me to begin preempting various topics whilst Thalman was away. My eyes continued to scroll across topic after topic, the seemingly endless library of information being more than familiar to me given the sociology department and diplomatic corps mythological lessons and constant drilling. There was just so much to pick and choose from, and part of me simply wanted just to go for complete time-lapse of civilization, but I'd hold off on that for now. At least until Thalman came back with the accompanying equipment he needed to start his own demo with. And return he did, now with an eclectic collection of objects cradled in his arms, objects ranging from a book that looked more akin to a massive party-sized ancient tome that could literally be used as a bludgeoning weapon in a pinch, a metal bracelet that looked like a love child between an ancient bear trap and an archaic dentistry apparatus, along with a mysterious satin sack that rattled with each and every step he took. The Lupinar promptly and proudly placed this random assortment of items on the coffee table in front of us, and within the span of the next few minutes got to work assembling it. First by opening the book with a dull, table-rattling thud, flipping the book several pages in, then by attaching the gnarly metal bracelet up and along the spine of the book, before clamping it down with a hair-raising clank. The clamp extended outwards to reveal several sockets extended on spindly arms above the pages of the book, clearly intended for something. The whole thing currently looked like an orrery had been fused into a book, with the different sockets empty and waiting final addition. That something soon turned out to be the contents of the red and white velvety sack, which consisted of an array of crystals, rocks, and strangest of all, a small vial of iridescent liquid. Thelman soon began the careful and meticulous process of placing crystal after crystal in each of the sockets, before grabbing a few glass lenses and pouring the mysterious liquid over them, causing them to glow a bright pink hue. The completed product turned out to literally just be a book caged in a metal clamp with various crystals, rocks, and a vial of glowing liquid all suspended above it within the jaws of the clamp. Again, like an orrery pulled straight from the heavy metal album cover. And if you excuse my ignorance, Thelman, what the heck am I supposed to be looking at here? Now you know how it feels when you bring out another reality-defying artifice out of your pockets, Emma, Thelman replied with a cocky jab, complemented by a smile that more or less confirmed his friendly and fastidious intent. Right then, this here is a common implement, one that has been seen by untold realms worth of eyes across the unimaginable length of eons. An implement that has been reproduced in innumerable quantities with an equally lengthy number of design iterations. The commoners call it a pocket plane. We call it a poor man's transportium, for reasons that are very, very apparent, of course. Eleanor placed a single hand upon his frilly neckerchief at that, letting out an obnoxious laugh only a noble was capable of. This was, however, swiftly shut down by a growl from Thelman as he not so subtly urged the Venerian to move on. As I was saying, it is actually referred to by the proper moniker as sightseer. I blinked a few times at that name, cocking my head as I did so. Does that imply what I think it implies? Indeed, an ingenious name if I do say so myself, for you see different sights through the seer, as if you were a sightseer, a tourist, a visitor, an adventurer embarking on new realms. Eleanor paused. I didn't really have anything to respond to that with, as I simply stared Eleanor down with a stone-cold expression. Okay, first off, I admit I loved the pun. Eleanor, completely flabbergasted and not expecting my response, responded with an incredulous retort. It is not just a common jape, Emma Booker. It is a thoughtful and well-worded title for such a time-honored artifice, even if it may have lost its novel luster over the generations. It is still prudent to respect the title given its original artificer. I'm not dissing it, Eleanor. I'm saying that I actually enjoy the humor in that title. But there is no humor to be found. This is a serious matter befitting of your new realm of respect. And respect it I will, I quickly interjected, halting what sounded like the start of an enthusiast's defensive tirades. Depending on course and how it stacks up to what I had packed away, I quickly added with a wink. And I'm going to hold off on any comparisons with my holo projector for now, at least until I see how well this thing works, I quickly added, prompting Thelman's eyes to grow wide with concern over exactly what I meant, but doing nothing to either placate or intimidate the Venerian. I soon turned towards Thelman with a nod. All right then, let's see it, I urged, attempting to cut off any further potential for interruptions from the Venerian. Thelman didn't waste any time as he turned his full attention towards the magical contraption, hovering both hands a few inches above two lenses that flanked the twisted orrery. Alert, localized search of mana radiation detected, 200% above background radiation levels. A search of mana radiation preceded what was in effect a tightening of the clamp onto the page of the book, the harsh metal at one point seemingly melting into the parchment-like paper, before releasing it suddenly and an abrupt whir as the different extensions began flading to and fro, the rocks and crystals glowing quickly after, before suddenly and abruptly raising mana radiation levels even higher. Alert, localized search of mana radiation detected, 250% above background radiation levels. Though not by too much, considering the other mana radiation blips I'd experienced so far. Not a second later, the room was bathed in a piercing white light, followed by shades of black and sepia that began layering themselves one after the other, until finally the rainbow of colors flashed before my eyes in a blinding instant, revealing what looked to be a watercolor painting that surrounded us on all sides. My rear and side-facing cameras revealed that there was now, in fact, a three-dimensional projection being overlaid all around us, like an immersive holographic experience. However, where holographic experiences generally took up more space and required a sparse, if not empty, room to operate optimally, this projection managed to more or less ignore our clustered surroundings almost entirely. Or more accurately, it actually managed to morph its surroundings for its own purposes, deconstructing and reconstituting it into whatever it was projecting. to the point where the world around us slowly melted into something new. The large bookshelf near the dining room table had suddenly become part of a thick and impenetrable door of some guardhouse. The dining room table and chairs themselves had similarly been transformed into a series of rustic-looking equivalents, with the silverware and fine decor becoming little more than spare parts and equipment, alongside a few jugs of ale and a whole load of dull weapons currently in the process of cleaning and sharpening. Regaining my bearings, it felt like we'd just been thrust into a whole other world, with only the immediate epicenter of the book itself spared from the strange holographic projection. We were now, in effect, a small bubble of our own reality, 2 sofas, a coffee table, and cold granite floors beneath us, surrounded by a living, breathing, watercolor painting of idyllic medieval world that would have fit right at home with the Chronicles of Zelda series, more specifically, the most recent hit, The Cries of the Empire. I looked up from the seated position to see the gates of some large medieval city in front of me, surrounded by a winding river with a single large white sandstone bridge whose design looked strangely Romanesque. A large guardhouse and guard tower stood in our way between the river and the city walls proper, manned by the platoon's worth of Lupinar guardsmen of varying heights, sizes, builds, and even equipment, with some looking like they just walked out of a spawn of the starter-tier cloth armor, and others donning full plate with dings and dents. Yet despite that, everything still had its toony, almost cel-shaded look to it, which was, again, the hallmark of the Cries of the Empire series, something that the sparse yet expansive stretches of farmland surrounding the city seemed to really add to as well. This infernal artifice requires more fine-tuning. Spare me a moment, Dalman interrupted abruptly, leaning down to tweak and reseat some of the crystals, which for a moment caused the world to lose color, then outline, then fine shading, almost reverting to what looked like a flipbook-like animation. I'm going to assume that this isn't supposed to look like a watercolor painting at the start. Yes, it is supposed to be realistic, and not some fairy tale brought to life, Thalman growled out in annoyance, more towards his equipment than anything else. Have you tried hitting it? The Lupinar paused, turning towards me with a befuddled expression. Trust me, it works, I offered once more through a sheepish smile, prompting the mercenary prince to let out a sigh of frustration before slamming the whole thing gently with his fist. Things started to radically shift almost immediately, as the bout of percussive maintenance resulted in yet another burst of mana radiation, coupled with the scenery surrounding us suddenly clearing up, going through layer after successive layer of animation, from sketch to line work to flat colors to shading, before suddenly turning photorealistic. It was as if someone had cycled through the different texture packs of Blick Block from the least to the most graphic intensive settings. Needless to say, it finally worked, as we were now well and truly immersed in the photorealistic holographic experience. Well then, Dalman blinked rapidly in response before turning towards me with a bewildered expression. I guess that works too, he spoke with a bemused chuckle. All right then, I think it should be apparent enough what this is. The Lupinar turned to the rest of the group, garnering a few nods, before landing his eyes back on me. For Emma's sake, I will explain it. This particular sightseer was made with the intention of recording my own personal experiences, for the purposes of demonstrating the current state of Havenbrock's capital to those that may request it, or to those that I may wish to show of my own volition. The Lupinar paused, as if pondering his next points carefully. However, I would be remiss if I did not mention the alternative uses of this artifice, as it likewise acts as a reminder of home for those instances I may wish to escape the stuffy confines of the academy for the familiar comforts of home. Furthermore, the court mages have likewise taken it upon themselves to translate everything from Havenbrock to High Nexian, so everything being spoken would be understandable to all of you. So with that out of the way, let us commence. The panoramic cinematic VR-esque experience around us quickly resumed, most obviously evidenced by everything around us moving again, but likewise by a second, rather unexpected addition that should have been obvious from the start. Welcome back, my prince. Sound, most notably in the form of the guards in front of the bridge speaking, before bowing each and every one of their heads in low greetings of the peer view of this immersive experience, Thalman himself. It hadn't yet occurred to me that there was a speaker system hidden within this ramshackle magical device. But then again, it was magic, so I guess full Colby Digital surround was to be expected. Glad to be back. I'm afraid that I have to report that there remains nary a straggler corps worth of Grey Fang Knights for you to hunt down now, Sir Rellan, was what undeniably Thelman's voice spoke with the perspective of the camera recording the whole experience, prompting me to do a double take as I cocked my head at the man. It wouldn't be a proper royal hunt if that wasn't the case, my friends, the red-furred wolf responded with a proper predatory grin on her face, soon backed up by a chorus of howling cheers from the rest of the guard unit, who each picked up their weapons and began clanging them against their shields. This act bothered the Venerian to no end, as he hissed in response. With that being said, here's a gift from my old man Balnan himself. The POV recording of Thelman continued, pulling out a heavy leather satchel before opening to reveal the bloody sword. Is that their coveted greatsword? Thelman responded, with a confidence imbued with both authority and regality, the man carrying himself in a way that honestly fit his title. Take it, it's yours. But I can't remember the promise, Sir Rellan. The spoils of victory shall go to those that carry the blade, loyal to the house that bears the writ of the call of arms. The red-furred wolf completed Dalman's sentence for him, nodding to him respectfully before handing the sword off to an older-looking wolf, who began inspecting and cleaning it almost instantly. The whole exchange felt as if I'd just been plonked into the middle of one of those multi-decade running fantasy shows, as whilst I got the context clues for it, I was now more or less just lost for the greater context of the scene. That accounts for the last of the Balnan Rebellion's regular forces. It shouldn't be long before they collapse under the pressure. POV Thelman continued up again, now walking across the bridge with a red wolf in tow. Just in time for your departure to the Nexus, Your Grace, she responded, changing the manner in which she spoke as the title she used for him just as they passed through the towering front gates. What were effectively two monolithic, turreted towers flanked the metal gate, with arrow slits and embrasures meticulously carved into the thick stone bricks. Some of them even looked too seamless to be done by hand, whilst others seemed to glow with a faint magical aura. A departure which I most graciously look forward to, Thalman responded in a sarcastic growl, before turning to the quickly gathered crowd of onlookers, lupinos of various shades and colors of fur, dressed in anything from shabby rags to colorful robes. Raising a hand, the crowd began cheering, but just as the festivities began, so too did it take a sudden shift, as a sudden, loud rattling emerged from behind the pair, belonging to a colorful and decked-out carriage painted in scenes of battle, with streaks of crimson coating the side, unclear of whether they were part of the canvas itself or the actual blood from the recent battle. The crowd really began gathering at this point, as another Lupinar poked his head out from the carriage before rising to the top like some sort of 23rd century politician in a sunroof motorcade. This wolf looked eerily familiar to Thalman, prompting me to do a double take with the man in real life, just before the question of this identity was quickly addressed by the holographic recording as it continued playing. Make way for the return of the Crown Prince's hunting party. Make way for His Royal Highness, Crown Prince Kramer. A booming voice from the front of the carriage shouted, prompting the POV Thelman and Rellan to step aside, as a long line of carriages, horsemen, pikemen, and 1,000 other assorted melee weapons-carrying soldiers began marching down the large open paths of the main street, now truly drawing the cheers, hoots, and hollers of the gathered crowd. There was a split second where POV Thelman's eyes seemingly met what I assumed was his elder brother, as the more decorated, lauded Lupinar gave him a visible nod before just as quickly being driven off towards a castle in the far distance. The pace of the recording seemed to slow down now, coinciding with the leisurely pace of the POV's walking speed, as I now took the time to take a good look at the world around me. All around me were what looked to be 3 to 4-story townhouse developments, with storefronts and open gutters leading to larger storm drains just beneath the roadside. Brick and mortar storefronts were practically cluttered and blanketed by the never-ending sea of informal and temporary-looking market stands that lined almost every inch of the raised sidewalk, forcing the pedestrians onto the street as they shared a large 3-lane road with constant traffic. A traffic consisting of buggies, the occasional chariot, and the seemingly ubiquitous open-back wagons that carried anything from livestock to hay to sacks of grains and barrels of ale. It was around this point that all pretenses of Havenbrock to High Nexian translations ended, as I could now hear the unfiltered speech of 1,000 different Lupinars speaking in anything from casual speech to loud shouts. More on the latter as well, given how the street hawkers seemed to be absolutely dominating the local space, selling anything from cured meats to salted fish to leather sandals and homemade baskets. Some stalls, even stalls both and sold alongside one another, advertising a sign that looked to be fish sandals. Looking further down the main road, which was notably constructed out of cobblestone and not paracrete, unisphalt, composite, or a composite of the three, the path seemed to head straight through an imposing castle that sat atop what was ostensibly a plateau. The distinction that needed to be made from the simple hill, as the large walled structure sat atop a natural elevation significantly higher than the rest of the city. In fact, there seemed to be a winding path that needed to be taken to actually reach the castle itself from ground level. A path that was barricaded by yet another set of walls deeper still into the city. Indeed, the more I looked, the more the city seemed more akin to a sort of fortress, a stronghold even, with layered defenses increasing the deeper and deeper you went, and structures rising in both height and grandeur the closer you got to the castle proper. If it wasn't for me knowing Thelman personally, the whole city would have given me a real evil empire capital vibes, with its propensity for darker color palettes and its preference for martial traditions in the form of these excessive defenses, not to mention the villain-like layer atop of the plateau. However, even if I didn't know Thelman, a few minutes' worth of people watching would have been enough for me to tell that aesthetics alone couldn't tell the whole story, as despite the seemingly bustling chaos, there was an order and respectfulness to everything, as younger working-age Lupinars aided the more elderly wherever they could, and storefronts, despite always being seemingly on edge of violent altercations, seemed courteous enough to help set up shop where two sets of hands were needed as opposed to one. Indeed, there was a strange sense of community here that wasn't that far off from both my hometowns, a vibe that continued the further Thelman and his guard went. Low-rise developments soon gave rise to 5, 10, and even 20-story structures, occasionally interrupted by a cathedral or other large public buildings, all of which seemed to be a cross between a Mediterranean Romanesque design, what with the Lupinar's seemingly never-ending obsession for pillars and colonnades, but crossed with a more medieval style of building with a wooden and stone construction, as well as facades adorned with wood and coarse plaster. Thatched roofing also quickly gave rise to red and orange tiled roofs, as well as increasingly cleaner and cleaner streets, larger open public spaces, and what seemed to be large building with steam coming out of the sides.
Is that what I believe it is?
Ulanor piped up. What? I spoke, only to have Thelman answer first. Public bathhouse, yes. The real-life Thelman responded proudly.
I cannot understand how you went through the Nexian reformations without reforming that specific aspect of your culture.
Hey, hygiene was one of the great innovations cited by the reformations, right? Well, that's hygiene right there, public hygiene at that. So why don't you just reform your own tongue before going off on my people? Thelman growled in response, prompting the Venerian to simply shrug as the video continued. Throughout the whole walk, conversations over daily life clued me into how things were run in Havenbrock, with Thelman more or less giving enough context clues through his back and forth with the guard to address the elephant in the room.
You should have remained with your brother, Your Grace. I would have been...
Are you suggesting, advising, or ordering me, Sir Rellan? POV Thelman cut her off before she could continue, prompting the red-furred wolf to straighten up.
A mere point of question of advisory wisdom, Your Grace.
The rest of that conversation seemed to devolve into a muted garbled mess, clearly on purpose, given how everything up to this point had been relatively clear so far. However, by the end of it, the guard eventually dipped her head down in acknowledgement of whatever was said. This was just as they both now reached what looked to be a magical elevator, completely circumventing the long winding road that went good 1,500 feet up towards the castle. It was clear now why Thelman had chosen this particular memory to show, as the near-wordless elevator ride through what was effectively a gas elevator made for a spectacular bird's-eye view of the city below. A city that seemingly stretched on for tens of miles, densely packed pre-industrial urban sprawl carefully separated through the strategic placement of walls, diverted canals, natural rivers, even incorporating natural barriers such as hills, cliff faces, and rocks. Beyond the city walls proper was a large open cultivated field that extended for farther than the eye could see, before ending in what seemed to be a well-kept forest just beyond the distant horizon. The elevator soon stopped, the doors opening to the tune of trumpets and a herald announcing Thalmann's return.
All thou for the return of Prince Thalmann Havenbrock, royal bearer of the spoils, keeper of the rich, tracker of traitors, and royal emissary for the Nexian sacrifice. The hologram just as quickly and abruptly came to an end at the foot of this grand castle. What looked to be a cross between an acropolis and a high-walled star fort, it was undeniably grand, going up a good 20 stories, with conical towers further raising that height by 10 more stories. Altogether, the entire castle took up the entire square footage of the plateau, its dark cobblestone exterior and lack of apparent windows giving it an all too appropriate vibe, consistent with the mercenary prince moniker Thalmann held. Grand, truly grand.
Eleanor piped up once again, in annoyance flaring through his nostrils in the form of a few latent flames.
I find this whole show exceedingly distasteful and very much in poor taste.
Okay, seriously, Eleanor, what is it now? I finally took the bait, turning to the Venerian in the same way I'd turned to someone constantly and incessantly nitpicking a good movie.
All that you see here, it doesn't belong to our mercenary prince's family. It was taken, stolen from those who had the rightful claim to the throne.
What the hell are you even? It's all right, Emma. Thalmann let out an annoyed growl, more towards Eleanor and then me, as he abruptly brought the hologram to a stop with a flick of his wrist. Since this matter seems to be a sore sticking point for a few of us, he glared at the Venerian for good measure, I may have to address it in one way or another. He took a breath in before exhaling as just as frustratingly. I am known as a mercenary prince for a reason, for what Eleanor says is true. My family were not the original incumbents of the throne of Havenbrock.
He took it,
Eleanor added abruptly with a dismissive hiss. Indeed, we did, Thalmann replied unapologetically, as if he was simply stating a fact set in stone with no reservations as to how it was taken by anyone else. This seemed to take Eleanor by surprise, as if he was expecting something of a sheepish or more remorseful acknowledgement.
You took it,
he reiterated harshly. Yes, Thalmann repeated himself. We did. Took it all. The throne, the titles, the castle, the cities, and the entire realm.
How can you be so...
Because it's the truth, Venerian. We took it all, for it was what we were owed. The Venerian, in a rare moment of shock, couldn't find the words to retort with. This prompted the Lupinar to continue unabated, as he now expanded on this whole drama with me, putting me in on the context, and at the same time hammering home the point to Eleanor for good measure. The former ruling family had outstanding debts in the form of unpaid and unsettled balances to the mercenary country of Demont, a company that, owing to the unique laws carried over from prior to the Nexian reformations, placed my land-owning family in equal standing to that of the entrusted nobility through what was known as the writ of the call of arms. As such, with debts refusing to be settled between royalty to the nobility, we took it upon ourselves to resolve the outstanding debts on our terms, relinquishing their royal assets and placing ourselves in control to rectify this imbalance. Thalmann stated in no uncertain terms what amounted to a coup. The standing army of Havenbrock was likewise, up to this point, unpaid for their services. Our first act as the House of Havenbrock was to clear up these debts, and in doing so, emptying the royal coffers to fill the coffers of those who owed their dues.
Which makes the so-called mercenary family of Havenbrock a single poorest ruling family in the entirety of the adjacent realms.
Eleanor spat back with a degree of cockiness. The wealth of a family means nothing if the coffers of those upholding their rule goes unfilled, Thalmann replied without hesitation, prompting me to finally chime in with a grin on my face. Thalmann, yes, Emma, I think you and I are going to get along just fine. Thalmann, in response to this, gave me the cockiest smirk imaginable. I am pleased to hear that, Emma of Earthrealm. A small pause punctuated the air after that, before Thalmann spoke up once again. Now then, who's next? End of chapter. I'd quickly like to thank the T5 peeps, Cold War Boomerwaffen, Sevaren Serberous, Bushmaster 177, Henry the Red, Casper Arnholtz, Cold War Boomerwaffen, Elijah Silvercross, Dragzoon W.R.E, and Sevaren Serberous. Thank you very much.